Hi, and welcome to the first web version of the Eustis Edge. I'm Tommy McMahon, president of Eustis Insurance and Benefits. For 15 years, you've heard the Eustis Edge on the radio, where we discuss important insurance topics of the day. We've decided to move the Edge over to the web so we can spend more time discussing these topics. Come on in, let's get the discussion started. I'm joined today by our panel, Gary Delahousie, Sonia Moore, and Julian Pasquet. Today's topic is schools and the unique risks they present. Gary, what comes to mind for you on schools?
Well, I think one of the really more important issues for schools today is head injuries. Not just head injuries, but concussions. The industry calls it traumatic brain injury. Sonia, what do you think is an important issue?
Property insurance is a big issue for schools, especially for the larger ones.
Right. Julian?
General liability and making sure you understand what's inside your insurance policies.
Those are three key issues revolving around schools. So let's go back and touch on these. Gary, let's start on the concussion and the head trauma. A little depth there. Tell us what you're seeing.
Well, we're seeing claims come from every single sport because of traumatic brain injuries. And the industry is evolving exceptionally fast. And to make it tremendously more complicated, each insurer is using a different coverage form for the concussion coverage. Makes it very complex. So it's really, really important for all of our school clients to review this particular issue every single year because it's evolving so fast.
Is this just on the team sports? Does this apply to intramurals as well?
Intramurals, any kind
Everything,
of sport,
yeah.
whether it's go-karts, intramurals, football,
Equestrian,
basketball, equestrian, doesn't matter.
Sonia?
We're starting to see a lot of exclusions for concussions on the umbrella and the D&O policy. We can usually get the umbrella exclusion removed if the school has the appropriate controls in place to make sure they're preventing and monitoring brain injuries.
Right. Julian, you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's important to make sure that each school has a written concussion policy. That policy can be assisted by Eustis with our best practices. Needs to be administrated by your executive staff, your trainers, and your coaches. And at the beginning of each school year, it needs to be properly put in place with the student athlete and their parents or guardians. Good
point. The next topic that was brought up was the property. And Sonia, I think that was the one you were thinking about. What do you see evolving here in the exposure world regarding property?
Well, we're seeing a lot of rate reductions and deductible reductions, and the coverage is getting broader. So we can analyze your school's policy and make sure that you're positioned in the market properly, that you're getting the best rates and deductibles that are available for your school, and that your coverage is broad.
Okay. Julian, how about you? When you look at property, what comes to mind?
Well, it's important first to look at your limits each year. Mm-hmm. The main reason you want to look at those is to prevent any kind of co-insurance penalty. So a co-insurance penalty can be put in place to make sure that you're carrying at least 80 or 90% of the needed limit for your school. Now, sometimes you might have agreed value, which will cancel out co-insurance and remove that penalty for you. But it's still important to make sure that you're reviewing your limits and your coverages. Sometimes after a hurricane, you might run into an instance in which you're forced to meet a new building code or ordinance. And in order to have coverage for that situation, you have to have that addressed on the front end.
Yeah, good point. Gary, how about you? And if you don't mind, bring in the flood piece, because I know that's a big part of the property, but it's usually segregated.
Sure, and one of the issues that everybody should always look at, the schools should, is tuition and whether or not it is a covered item under your business interruption coverage. From a coverage from a flood insurance standpoint, the National Flood Insurance Program does not provide coverage for business interruption. It only provides coverage for building and contents. So in order to purchase that coverage for business interruption for the peril of flood, you must purchase an excess flood policy. So it's very important that we all know what happened during the Katrina issue, so it's very important that these schools review their coverage, including the excess flood.
And the triggering events too. I think we talked about this a little bit before we started taping, was what triggers the coverage. And the wind-driven rain seems to be a big issue that's being brought on now, whether that's property damage or not.
Big issue.
Our next topic that, Julian, you brought up was the general liability form and some of the issues that are presented there. So what's top of mind for you?
Right. Well, there are no two coverage forms in liability that are the same. Coverage form is simply your protection at the time of loss. It's important to make sure that that's reviewed and you understand what's inside that school program. We're seeing a lot of exclusions and limitations. We see armed guard limitations, bus transportation limitations, exclusions for abuse and molestation, punitive damages. We've also run into mental anguish exclusions. Now, it's important that you understand that an insurance policy can simply be bound, put in place. But understanding what's inside that policy is really, really an important aspect of it.
A key issue there. Gary, you have something to add to that?
Well, from a liability standpoint, it's very, very important to review the policies themselves, especially schools sign so many leases. And it's really, really important that they look at these leases with their insurance agent and their lawyer, because every lease or document that you sign that's kind of like a lease has an insurance paragraph and an indemnification paragraph. And those can either put a tremendous amount of liability on the schools, or we can transfer liability to other parties through a very well documented risk transfer in the document.
Right. Key point there. Risk transfer, Sonia, you have something to add to that?
I think it's important that schools look at their professional liability exposures. Not only do you have the teaching professional exposure, but you have your school nurses, counselors, social workers, speech therapists. We can help you review those exposures and make sure that you have the appropriate coverage in place to protect yourself.
These are three key issues. So the concussion, the property, and the general liability form. We could discuss this all day long, as you can see. I hope you found this version of the Eustis Edge informative and maybe even a little entertaining. If you have questions on this or any other insurance topic, give us a call at 504-586-0440 or visit us on the web at eustis.com. We'll see you next time on the Eustis Edge. For a consultative review of your insurance program, give us a call at 504-586-0440 or visit us on the web at eustis.com.